Clark Kent would be a kind of a light way of looking at this, but the last week of the series, we're going to look, because the World Series should be going by then, and maybe the Dodgers will be in it. Not that they're my team, but the Dodgers are the club that integrated baseball, and so Jackie Robinson and the general manager of the Brooklyn Dodgers, Branch Rickey, were both Methodist. And so how their faith helped to guide how the baseball became integrated is kind of a neat story, and one that is out of our heritage. So my prayer is that through these few people that we talk about over the next few weeks, that it will help you to embrace your own faith heritage a little bit, as we see people, ordinary people. Even Reverend Helms is just an ordinary person, as they reflect Christ in their life and in the world, and also help us to see the potential that the church, the institution that Christ left, still has to make an impact in the world today. And hopefully it might give you a little bit of reason to be able to say, this is why church matters, is because of folks like this. So this is Edgar Helms. He grew up in Iowa after being born in the state of New York. His parents wanted out of the big city of New York during the time of the Civil War. And so they homesteaded up in the upper Midwest on the prairies, and that's where when he says where's home, it's Iowa. In the 1880s, he heard a calling to go into ministry, so he left the family farm, much to the dismay of his mother, and in a quite different way than the youngest son left the farm in the parable that we just finished up. And he went to Boston Theological School in surprising Boston, Massachusetts. Yeah, all right. So while studying there, he committed the cardinal sin of appointments. He asked for a specific church. Yeah, never do that. If any of you ever end up in the ministry, bishops don't tend to like that. And in particular, I mean, this is not somebody who'd been 50 years in the ministry who his word might mean something. This was a seminarian. Someone kind of fresh off the turnip cart, so to speak. And here he's asking for a particular church. Oh, and by the way, it was in the richest neighborhood of Boston. Right? Why not, I guess, right? If you're going to aim big, right? Go big or go home. Well, the bishop got so upset with him that he gave him an appointment. But it was into the slums of Boston. And there he started the nation's first settlement house. Now, a settlement house was for the rush of immigrants that were coming in, particularly along the East Coast from Europe, and they were just thousands and thousands of immigrants coming in week after week and month and year, and they would settle into these settlement houses. And Edgar Helms's idea was, let's teach them English, so they could learn the language, and let's teach them job skills. Because we're right in the middle of the Industrial Revolution. The Empire State Building is going up during this time. Manhattan is becoming the centerpiece of industry during this time. So jobs were needed. Jobs were available. But they needed the skills. And so Helms did that. And so he helped, thousands of people during his appointment in the settlement house down in the slums to overcome the obstacles that any immigrant faces when moving into a new place. So this bishop saw the success that he had, and how he was making, lemonade out of the lemons that he thought that he was sending him. And bishops do what bishops do, and he moved him. Can't have success, right? And he moved him to Morgan Hill Chapel. Now, in her 1965 biography about Edgar Helms, Beatrice Plum described Morgan Hill, and that's a picture of it behind the quote there. She described Morgan Hill this way: in the filthy, lice-infested tenements around Morgan Chapel were the dregs of the city: prostitutes, alcoholics, drug addicts, thieves, thugs, and gamblers. Everyone's dream appointment. So where the world saw crime, losers of society, those dirty Europeans, and the worst of the worst, Edgar Helms saw hope and untapped potential. Seeing the overwhelming need for food and clothing, he literally put a potato sack over his shoulder and got on his horse, went over to the affluent areas in Boston, and started taking up collection, door to door. What can you give? Then he would take it all back to Morgan Hill Chapel to have it sorted out, shoes here and socks there and canned goods here and all of those, that type of thing. And he had this radical ideal that we could pay people to do this, to sort it. And he offered $4 a week for people to do the sorting of the donations. $4 a week in 2019 is the equivalent of $100 a week. Right? You could all live on that, right? Maybe $4 a week bought you a lot more than $100 a week does today, right? But his idea was simple. Not charity, but a chance. That he felt the dehumanizing piece of just giving someone something and telling them to get out. But rather to give people an opportunity to earn for their own selves and for their families. In a 1924 newspaper interview, he says this. He said, and remember, he's talking in 1924 language, so he said, "You can't trust a man by doubting him. When he tells us he wants to work, we assume that he does. When you give a man a job, you're not dealing with a pauper. He is not an applicant for charity. He wants to give something for what he receives." What a noble ideal. In the last decade of his life, he also then expanded whose voice he was trying to advocate for beyond just those in poverty or those who were migrating into the United States. But he began advocating for the disabled community. Those in wheelchairs or those whose arms and legs didn't quite work right. Those with Down syndrome. And in the last few years of his life, he began hiring those in the disabled community and transformed what was by then well known as Goodwill Industries into the nation's, or one of the nation's loudest voices for the advocacy for all persons and the equality of all persons especially for those with the added yoke in their life of being disabled. The legacy of Edgar Helms can be found not only throughout the United States, but around the globe. Today, Goodwill Industries is in more than a dozen countries and has employed more than 7 million people, most of which were either in poverty, suffering from a disabling condition, or both. Even to this day, they continue to provide skills and job training. If you ever drive on Webb Road in Wichita, you can drive by where they do this in Wichita. So they continue to live out of their roots and their core mission to help give people a chance, in addition to all of the resale shops that dot the continent. And unbeknownst to Reverend Helms, I should say, he ushered in a new way of being church, where church was no longer seen as something that we speak from the pulpit for 20 minutes on a Sunday, but rather something that is lived out each and every moment of our lives, which impacted Boston first, and then now all of the communities in which Goodwill Industries operates out of. Edgar Helms was cited by President Lyndon Johnson as one of his spiritual heroes, and in reading about Edgar Helms, then became convicted that something within the federal government needed to be deployed in order to attack systematic poverty. And in his 1964 State of the Union, declared war on poverty and used Helms as one of his guiding principles for legislation. And Helms had to be smiling when in 1990, President George H.W. Bush signed into law the Americans with Disabilities Act to recognize the equality needed in access to buildings and sidewalks, not just public buildings, but private buildings. For us to add the push button here is probably after that. Well, obviously it would have been because this was built in '89. So, and I don't know, maybe we need another one there for inside. Right, the phrase reasonable accommodation has now littered employee manuals across HR departments throughout the country. When I was serving in Kingman, the disabled community there sued the city over sidewalks because the sidewalks were not there. There was no curbing for anyone that with a walker or with a wheelchair, and to hear some of the people there fight against that was really saddened me that in this era we still have people that would say that they don't need access. The first blessing found in the Beatitudes is what Jared read. It's the blessing of the poor in spirit. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven, Jesus says. Reverend Helms lived out this verse of the Bible each and every day through his endless work in the most reviling conditions in America. He advocated for those suffering from legal and cultural discrimination because he was a student of Wesley and Wesley's understanding of the Bible. That all people are under grace and all people have worth. John Wesley preached all the time about the tenets of Matthew 25, that whatever you do for the least of these, you do in the name of Christ. So in the Beatitudes, Jesus says that we are blessed when people revile you and persecute you for changing things up. And Reverend Helms was persecuted first by his bishop, right? But maybe more importantly, that he went out to those who were being reviled and persecuted because of some language or some physical condition or a mental condition. His mental health would be right in that same wheelhouse as physical limitations. And when he saw the face of Christ through them, he was living out these two verses in the Bible. He brought them dignity and value as people made in the image of God. Wouldn't it be nice if at our funerals the pastor could say that with sincerity? So when United Methodists speak about their heritage, or our heritage, of fighting for justice and accessibility into buildings and transportation systems, and perhaps more importantly, the accessibility into the heart, we stand on the shoulders and the work of folks like the Reverend Edgar Helms, who took on great personal risk to make this world more like the kingdom of heaven than it was before his work began. I often wonder if the bishop that sent him originally into the slums of Boston really knew the power of what he was doing, and whether or not they ever had a conversation later in life, for Helms to thank him for not sending him where he wanted to go, but instead sending him where God needed him to go. So to me, it also just kind of reflects the ideal that the appointed process for United Methodist sometimes seems rather messy, and yet there are times when the right person gets to be in the right place at the right time. And thank God in this case that did occur. So as the ushers come forward to receive this morning's offering, let me close with this statement of faith from our social principles. The social principles are voted on at every general conference. They change throughout time, and this is our current statement on full humanity and personhood of those with mental, physical, developmental, neurological, and psychological conditions. It reads this way: we recognize and affirm the full humanity and personhood of all individuals with mental, physical, developmental, neurological, and psychological conditions or disabilities as full members of the family of God. We also affirm their rightful place in both the church and society. And we urge the church and society to recognize and receive the gifts of persons with disabilities to enable them to be full participants in the community of faith. Let's pray. God, what a gift you have given to those who are directly impacted by Goodwill Industries, for the hope and for the opportunities that Goodwill and other associated communities like them provide in this world. God, we thank you for the calling that you placed upon Reverend Helms, and for his work with the least of these, for his example of giving of self and of surrendering to your will. And may his example be with us and inspire us as well. And may we be generous with our tithes this morning, as well as with our time and our talents, for our affirmation of everyone's talents and abilities is heard in our social principles. So may you bless this and bless us in the week ahead to reflect Christ in all that we do and in all that we say. In Christ's name, amen.
While the ushers receive this morning's tithes and offerings, let me call your attention to some announcements. And I would take this time to invite any member of the congregation who wishes to make an announcement to come forward at this time. A reminder to all youth present or listening, youth group kicks off tonight. That will be at 5 o'clock at the home of Daryl and Donna Henry. I asked Daryl and Donna for directions if you need them. Home gatherings have begun. There's an opportunity to keep communication open between Pastor Patrick and our church. Please sign up in the book on the table in the narthex if you would like to host or attend one of these meetings. UMW is celebrating 150 years of women's ministries with a salad supper on Thursday at 6:30. All are invited. There's also a display of UMW artifacts in the display cases back in the fellowship hall. Healthy Congregations is offering a free cooking class open to the community. It's on September 17th at 5:30 in the fellowship hall. I'm assuming talk to Janine with any questions about that. It says 17th on here. Yeah, double check with Janine on the date.
Yeah.
Also a reminder that the United Methodist Church's Committee on Relief, otherwise known as UMCOR, is helping with Hurricane Dorian relief. With that, 100% of all donations go directly to the areas that have been impacted and will be impacted by Hurricane Dorian. Also, Pat asked me to announce the Western Plains Arts Association production this afternoon has been moved from 3 p.m. to 7:30. It is still at Oakley High School. It's called For Freshmen.
All right, I'm Kara Kuhlman, and I just wanted to announce, Puddle Duck is celebrating their 20th year, and so we thought they deserved a full weekend of fun. So we've got things coming up the very end of September. So Saturday, September 28th is going to be board game day, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Come and go as you like to play games. We'll have snacks, lunch, and dinner available for a free will donation. I am sending around a sign-up sheet, so if you'd like to donate any food items for that, that would be much appreciated. We'll also have raffle tickets available after church. This year we have $250 in Thomas County Community Foundation bucks, a $100 Amazon gift card that comes with a really fun game called No Thanks, and then another set of games that would be, I think, very fun to play for anyone. All of our proceeds are going to go to Puddle Duck to celebrate their 20th year. If you can't come or you want more information, I'll be just in the back at the end of church, or you can even pick up a flyer to share. And then Sunday the 29th will be Puddle Duck Sunday. We will have the kid-focused service, as Pastor mentioned. We'll have a free will donation lunch, and then the duck drop again afterwards. This year, first prize will be $300 cash, second prize $200, and third prize $100. So you can buy ducks after church starting today if you want to come back and see Mrs. Jennings and I. Thank you.
One more announcement. On the north table as you leave is a two-sided sheet of paper with a lot of names on it. One of the things that churches are supposed to do regularly is to call through their membership. And so, but most churches don't. And so, but I do. So you're stuck with me doing this. But we have sent out a letter, and we've also sent out messages on Facebook to people that have not been a worshiping or part of the worshiping community in quite some time. So if they reported an address that was in Colby, then they're on one side. If they reported an address outside of Colby or outside the general area here, then they're on the other side. And then it's also, if they did not respond to a letter, then they're in one area. If they didn't respond to a letter, plus they didn't respond to anything on Facebook that was sent to them, then they're in that area. And then there's one that we just don't have an address for. So we have subscribed to a service that will give you most recent and current addresses. And there's one that apparently it's way too recent even for whatever that database is. So what we do with this, in order to remove someone from membership from the church, it takes 3 years or a response. So the first year is merely a listing of the names to say, hey, these are the folks that aren't participating. They haven't been to worship. They haven't been on a mission day. They've not been in a Bible study. They've not given anything financially to support the ministries of the church. And your role is to look these over, to see who you know, and to encourage them to do one of two things: either come, start participating again, or to just request that their membership be moved to wherever it is that they're worshiping now. And so this way we'll get a cleaner feel for our membership and where we are as a church. So we have, if you've been to one of the meetings, you know we've already, through responses of this, have removed 160 names. And there is another 196 names here. So my asterisk on this is, since I'm new, I may have accidentally put someone on here that has been here and is active, and if so, just let me know. I like to think that I know names, but sometimes I think that I'm better than I really am. So, and if that's the case, 1,000 apologies. That's not the intent of this, is to embarrass anyone who is actually participating. It really is just to clean things up and to get an accurate feel for our membership. So these will be available out on the table the next 4 Sundays, and then the administrative council at their October meeting then will be voting to accept this report and move it on to the church conference. So, and no one gets removed either, so it takes 2 more years. Okay. If you have any questions about that, just ask.
For our closing hymn, if you would remain standing and sing hymn number 577, God of Grace and Glory.